Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm going to give it like 30 more seconds and we will kick off our webinar. All right. It is good to have you all here today. I'm Ashley Wilson Oster with E4E Relief, and I will be moderating today's conversation. It's Global Disaster Resilience, Strategies for Preparedness, Response, and Recovery. Thank you for making the time to join us today. It's a conversation we're excited to share with you, and we welcome your engagement. So please feel free at any time. The chat is open. We would love to kick off the chat if you could tell us where you're dialing in from today. It's always fun, especially when talking about disaster season, to know where you're located. And then that helps us know maybe what you've faced as it relates to disasters. So the chat will be open. The questions will also be open. So if you have a question as one of our panelists are speaking or around our data, don't hesitate to drop the question in the Q&A, and we will be happy to get to that during our time. We will also be recording. So I know that there's going to be a million awesome moments throughout this that you might want to take notes. Know too that we will be glad to send you this recording if anything is helpful. And we would love to know what actually was helpful. So you will get an email from us afterwards. And if there's anything that was particularly helpful for you, don't hesitate to let us know. All right. If we haven't met before, I'm going to introduce myself first and then the awesome panelist. Next month will mark 8 years that I've had the great fortune of working at E4E Relief. I am currently serving as our marketing and partnerships leader. And if you're learning about E4E Relief for the first time, this is a really cool season to be sharing about our work. We believe that E4E Relief has set the global standard in employee financial relief. We are compassion-led, technology-forward, and we are trusted by some of the greatest companies of the world. Many of you are online today. Thank you. We are committed that when emergencies disrupt lives, E4E Relief swiftly responds by delivering cash grants that put immediate support and hope into the hand of individuals. It is an exciting season for us, as I mentioned, because our organization is marking 25 years of providing relief to individuals. It is important to us that we are gathering leaders in the field and advance the ecosystem of crisis response alongside our clients. So today I am joined by a fabulous group of experts in their own fields. And our goal for the time today is that we would add value to the great work many of you are already doing as you navigate within your organizations to develop sustainable means of responding to the ever increasing crisis that impact your people. So let's jump in and meet the panel. First up is Nathan Cabos. And Nathan is the Director of Environmental Sustainability at one of our wonderful clients, AT&T. And in this role, he leads the company's resiliency initiatives. His work focuses on applying forward-looking severe weather data to identify potential business and network vulnerabilities, and on developing the tools and solutions that reduce future hazard exposure across the organization. Thanks for being with us, Nathan. Anything you want to add about AT&T?
Thank you for having me. No, I'm sure you all are familiar with AT&T. And I'm on the environmental sustainability team, which a lot of people are unfamiliar with our work, don't know that there's even a sustainability arm, and my focus is resilience and disaster relief. I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you, Ashley.
Absolutely. I always love to share something of interest about our panelists as well, because we are in the people business. So I did want to highlight that Nathan has used his volunteer engagement and contribute to the resilience of others through Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So thank you for being with us, Nathan.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
We have Janelle Sadomer, and she is the Chief Impact Officer at visit.org, where she designs purpose-driven engagement experiences that connect employees to community impact. When disasters fracture communities and employees want to be part of the solution, her team can design how that engagement may be meaningful. So Janelle, you want to tell us a little bit about visit.org?
Hello. Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. Visit.org, we are a certified B Corp. We exist in the world to connect employees to causes that they care about through volunteerism. So we design volunteer experiences and social impact experiences for companies around the world. You can think of your hands-on volunteering and impact kits, to skills-based volunteerism, to highly curated, interesting, volunteer events for large teams around the world. And really, we just want to be able to inspire individuals to give back in common causes of caring, especially in times of disaster as well. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So glad you're here. And Janelle has offered her engagement and resilience building to the Black Business and Professional Association as well. So she is always up to a lot of good. I encourage everybody to follow her as well. Last but not least is David Leathers. He is the Director of Extreme Weather and Work at Health Action Alliance, where he leads the nation's premier initiative helping employers manage and mitigate extreme weather risk to their workforces. So, David, can you tell us a little bit about Health Action Alliance?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. Health Action Alliance is the largest business network in the US, really focused on how health impacts workers. And I'm sure it's not a big jump for many folks on this call about how workforce health impacts business health and continuity. And we operate in a lot of domains. We did work around COVID. We've done work around women's health, mental health, HIV, lots of health-related issues. And I lead our work on climate and extreme weather, which is really focused on this program called Extreme Weather in Work, which I'll share more about soon. But ultimately, we exist to help employers really understand how to support their people and communities, which helps their business as well. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here, David. And thank you also for building resilience with others through your work of iMentor and giving back through mentorship and offering being a partner to others in their career. It's very cool, and always important that we practice what we preach, right? And give back to the communities that we're in. So thanks for all that you three will offer on this panel. I'm going to transition us just for a few minutes to level set on what many of us recognize is the environment many are facing related to climate disasters and everyday hardships here in the US and around the globe. It's always helpful to just kind of look at like what are we just coming out of. So first, let's look at what happened in 2025. In 2025, the United States experienced $1 billion weather or climate disaster once every 10 days. 23 events, 115 billion in damages, 276 lives were lost. And for context, in the 1980s, the average gap between these events was 82 days. And so over the last decade, it shrank to 16 days. In 2025, it was 10. Disasters are no longer unexpected interruptions to the operating calendar. They are a new and unfortunate rhythm for many people. And all of you, of course, are on the front line of responding to this. We offer this stat because we want to immediately make the case that all organizations confront the need to investing in the resilience of their workforce. The plans look different for everyone, but understanding the potential risk and preparing for a response is significant work. And we hope today we can continue that conversation. Next, let's look at the data on a broader scale. The global disasters are also increasing in scale and frequency, excuse me. But the bigger risk to organizations is what happens next. More than 100 million people were impacted by disasters last year alone, yet nearly half of the economic losses worldwide remain uninsured. At the same time, only about half of the adults globally have access to emergency funds when a crisis hits. So, when a typhoon, a wildfire, a humanitarian crisis occurs, the real question becomes how will employees afford to recover? How can they absorb a financial shock? We know that the financial gap is often what determines whether people are able to return to work quickly, are able to navigate well at home, and are able to contribute to the community resilience. So let's look at what made 2025 and early 2026 especially instructive. If we could maybe pop to the next slide. Thank you so much. This is really, it's shocking to think about, but the costliest disasters in this last year and even already in the beginning of this year were not the ones that most organizations had on their radar. No major hurricanes made US landfall, even though three Category 5 storms formed over the Atlantic last year. And that's just the second time on record that that's happened. Instead, 91% of billion-dollar events were severe storms and wildfires, what the insurance industry calls non-peak perils, although I doubt anybody in those regions would have felt the same. The January LA wildfires alone caused 61.2 billion in damages, which is twice the previous wildfire record, and affected more than 47,000 workers across the burn and evacuation zones. 2026, already this year, landed many communities with harsh winter storms. In Charlotte, we thought it was exciting because we have not had 10 inches of snow. I never in my lifetime. But for many, this really wreaked havoc on infrastructure and within homes. And E4E Relief alone distributed 8 million for Winter Storm Fern. Globally, 22 billion was occurred in damage and 17,200 lives were lost from the events of 2025 and early 2026. So there's a few takeaways here. We are learning together as we go what it looks like to respond well. The recovery gaps, as many people know, are often outlast the headlines by leaps and bounds. Many in LA are still in temporary housing and the benefits are expired. It takes immediate and sustained attention to have real recovery. And resilience, for today's purpose, let's define that as the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. We know that actual resilience takes collaboration, local trust, relationship building, timing, and long-term volunteering. I want to talk about another side of the issue that we at E4E Relief have had 25 years of frontline experience to see that anyone can face unexpected financial challenges and that the impact of those have gravely different impact on the individual's immediate life. Here's my personal moment of the day, because I think many of us have stories that can relate to what's going on for many of your employees. My family recently faced a layoff and a car accident in the same week. The immediate stress and financial anxiety was palpable in our household. The well-being of all members in the household felt fragile. And while we are a part of many stats right now, especially in the US, we are also fortunate that we created a family emergency fund a few years ago and that I work for a great, caring, and resourceful organization that will help me go through this. We put everything we could into place in order to adjust. So to know that last year, based on the recent Federal Reserve data, 59% of US adults faced at least one major unexpected expense. That's significant, especially when we know 1 in 4 Americans are struggling to pay all their bills already. Financial well-being, according to this report, declined for young adults, low-income families, and Black adults. Why this matters is that fragility is not evenly distributed. And so making preparedness for all employees is critical. And employer-sponsored relief programs, we believe, is a really equitable part, an important part of equitable support. So finally, as I close out this opening section, let's look at the readiness gap. Here's all the stats of what we know has happened. How are people responding? And I want to share what we're seeing and see where you find your company on its journey towards facilitating global resilience through programs, policies, benefits, and plans. What we know is that 82% of US workers say they were impacted by a weather-related disruption at work in the past year, but just 4% of employers have assessed which of their employees are most at risk. Pause on that for a second. You know how many are being impacted. We know that climate events aren't selective and large swaths of our teams are at risk. Meanwhile, 43% of employees say their employer's readiness for extreme weather influences whether they stay long term. So people are taking notice. That's not a safety stat. That's a talent strategy stat. One third of Americans have taken no financial steps to prepare for a disaster, even though two-thirds say it would significantly impact their finances. We also recognize that our average grant size here at E4E Relief is between $1,400 and $1,500 for disaster events. So there's a lot to think about how even small grants have a large impact from altering the course of an individual and buoy their chance of adapting and growing resilience. The gap between what employees are living through and what employers are doing, that's the central focus of today's conversation. So at this time, I'd love to bring back our panelists and jump into the conversation. All right, good to see you all. I just walked through some pretty striking numbers, and I want to start just by getting your reactions. When you hear the disaster 2025 trends, what's one insight that either surprised you or one that confirmed what you're already seeing in your work? David, let's start with you.
Thanks, Ashley. I think all those stats on there, especially the one around 1 in 3 Americans have not essentially prepped financially for disaster. I think that unfortunately it's not surprising, but that number, from my understanding, hasn't changed over the years, while the actual financial risk of disasters has gone up. That what you talked about in the 80s, there was a long amount of time between disasters, and it keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and it will continue to shrink. And so I think we really need to find ways to move those stats in the direction where we actually have more people preparing for these risks as they become more intense and more frequent as well.
Yeah, agreed. Janelle, what stuck out to you or surprised you?
Similar to Nathan, I think it's not entirely surprising, but I guess the precariousness of the situations, because my family is from St. Lucia in the Caribbean, so the global south. So I know firsthand the devastation of many of these natural disasters in terms of hurricanes and stuff like that. But I think, the fact that we know that climate is changing, the fact that we know that these disasters are coming on, more frequently, and the devastation, I think, is more widespread. Understanding that folks are not as prepared as they really could be. That is an interesting sort of contrast, because it's obviously something that we can all see, think, feel, and understand because it's happening around us. So, why the preparedness is not there was one that was a little bit surprising to me.
Excellent point.
Mm.
Nathan, anything you'd like to add? What stuck out to you?
See a statistic all the time, but it's the increase in billion-dollar disasters. And so when I see that, my initial thought, even though this is the realm I work in, is that, oh, that's because of inflation. But those are inflation-adjusted numbers. And so it is shocking to see in real time and say, wow, disasters are getting more severe and it is affecting our work. That's probably why we all have our positions, right? That's the one that always tends to and I see it all the time, and every single time it still shocks me.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, my hope for us today is that while it's shocking and seeing the gap is so clear, that we don't take that as, extra anxiety or something that isn't anything but opportunity, and that we can help provide some advice or guidance or just practical steps today that can help close that gap, given the fact that the disasters are going to continue. So Nathan, let's stay with you, because AT&T really operates at a scale where these trends show up in real time across your network and for your people. So how do you balance planning for the known seasonal risk with preparing for less predictable events across such a large footprint? And where have you had to adjust your approach recently?
For long-term planning, and this is the work on the resiliency team that I get to work on. So in collaboration with Argonne National Laboratory, we have this forward-looking climate data. So we're talking mid-century wildfire weather index, precipitation, storm surge, heat, which is important for outdoor workers. And that data is available for free online it's climber, CLIMRR.ANL.gov. Thank you for putting it in the chat. I appreciate it. And anybody can get on there and leverage that same data. So that's long term. So we leverage that data to assign risk scores to a lot of our network infrastructure. Every single mobility site in the network has a risk score associated with fire, wildfire, and flood. And we take that in consideration when planning new sites or picking sites. And then short term, AT&T has AT&T Weather and Operations Center, AWOC. So we have meteorologists who work for AT&T, and their focus is just to keep an eye on severe weather in the United States and how it's going to affect our network. So when something happens quick, and this is my team on the corporate responsibility team for like local facing community relief is small, but for network, we have a network disaster recovery team, huge 400 employees, 750 assets. So the network is up and running even during severe weather. And then we also have a FirstNet, which is essentially a network for first responders. And community-based assets sit in both in the network disaster recovery team, in the FirstNet team, and then also our team. We have a mobile connectivity center and charging trailers that we can deploy during unexpected disasters and have them there. Hopefully, sometime same day if it's close by, and then as quick as we can. So that's for long term and the unexpected and how we deal with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is, I'm sure, extremely complex in the planning because you have both a lot of customers that are probably immediately reaching out, as well as your own people, and trying to make sure that you are able to respond to both of those. And quick timing is a big deal. So, David, I want to shift to the workforce health dimension of this because a lot of what Nathan has described has downstream health and well-being consequences that I think are underestimated. How should organizations be thinking about preparedness when the risk include not just physical damage from disasters, but also health impacts, mental health strain, and the long tail of productivity for people that are impacted?
Sure. So I think, from the vantage point that I have, I get to work with employers from across sectors. And sometimes the word employer is funny to me because ultimately individual people are making decisions in these employers. And I think we get to work with folks from medical and occupational health teams, from HR and corporate social responsibility teams, from disaster and emergency management teams. And I think the common thread there is that all those different teams, of course, care about the workforce and via that workforce, the community of actors there. But when we think about disasters, even the billion-dollar disaster number, we're thinking about physical assets and property. And that logic of saying, how do these things actually impact the physical, mental, and financial health of people? There's just a broken link there often in logic of thinking about a physical building versus someone, for instance, who has been subjected to 5 evacuations, their roof blowing off, and also losing their job because they couldn't show up to work, for instance. And so I think the big takeaway here for us is that this trend is moving faster than people realize. What we like to say is that these risks of disasters and heat and flooding are not new, but they are getting worse faster than most companies are preparing for them, especially in terms of human capital in the workforce. We see it showing up in healthcare costs, in workers' compensation claims. There's a lot of data around productivity and absenteeism. And I think it's not just about a one-time disaster, but it's repeated disasters and it's long-term chronic risks, like, a construction firm in Arizona or something like that with consistent exposure to extreme heat. And so all those things together are creating a much broader set of risks to workers and the workforces, in addition to sort of the core physical assets that we usually think about when we think of disaster damages.
Hmm. All right. So yes, you're asking us really to make sure that every organization is evaluating physical, mental, and health impacts, particularly within their workforce and community. Janelle, I want to bring you into the conversation. David's making the case that this is fundamentally a workforce health issue and that employers have more tools probably at their disposal than they realize. So when you're thinking about the employee and the community side, because employees don't just want to be supported, they want to be activated. Tell me how you have seen, or with the disasters over the last 2 years, what you're seeing in terms of the employees' desire to engage, support communities, and feel part of the solution, especially some of these newer generations who seem very eager to get involved.
Absolutely, Ashley. Well, I think there are a few things. So, I mean, 100%, we're seeing quite a bit of engagement of employees through all generations right now within the
Awesome.
workforce. I think it's actually in large part because we're such a connected society. So, if you think of social media, there's just access to information in ways that never has been before. So, when disaster strikes or when disaster is even coming, folks want to get involved and they're researching and they're understanding how individuals halfway across the world from them have been impacted. So I think that knowing and then finding ways to either give, financially, or if they can donate clothes or food or anything, I think folks want to be mobilized, I think, to your point. So, how we see things, it's really around helping to harness that excitement, that enthusiasm, that desire to give back from a purpose standpoint, and then really enabling employees to actually do that. I think because, within a disaster, folks want to go. Some of them want to be right in the center of a disaster. And obviously, in the midst of a disaster response happening, you need highly skilled and qualified, trained individuals and volunteers. So as much as, an individual might have this enthusiasm, it's not safe for anybody, not anybody who's actually facing the disaster or for the volunteer to go. So we look at visit.org at how we can really sort of design experiences that enable companies and enable their people, to respond to that disaster outside of the disaster zone. So if you think of, some of the sort of bespoke experiences that we have within our platform, you can actually then design globally responsive but locally relevant opportunities that employees can do within their workplace, even virtually, that enable them to feel like they're actually contributing in a meaningful way to a disaster that's happening. So, as an example, with the LA fires last year, we were able to mobilize for a number of our clients around some project in a box or impact kit experiences. And then these really provide the opportunity for local beneficiaries to receive either hygiene kits or kits for babies or mothers or children, but basically responding to the most urgent need that humans have when their house has been taken or they've been befallen on a disaster. So I think in this way, with our supply team, it actually enables individuals to feel like they're doing something. It enables companies to feel like they have a response, and they also have an employee engagement aspect to their response as well, but then it's being done in a safe way, in a productive way. And then because we are working with local beneficiaries as well, they know what's happening on the ground. We don't at visit.org profess to know everything that's happening in the midst of a disaster zone, but that local beneficiary network that we have enables any of those kits or any of the outputs from the volunteer opportunities to be deployed in the most effective way possible in the midst of a disaster. And I think to David's point as well, is it comes to mental health, we know that there's a loneliness crisis right now. We know that there's a burnout crisis happening right now. And, a lot of the data shows that when individuals can, be focused on purpose or feel that sense of impact, that actually helps to combat some of that. So I do think from a workforce engagement, a culture standpoint, and also a disaster response, standpoint, I think enabling and having, a preparedness strategy that enables employees to activate in a meaningful way, checks multiple boxes.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in what you said that I'm pondering, but yes, I mean, I think a few things. Like one, it's so critical to know and have good partners so that we aren't ever assuming need after a crisis. So that you can actually work with the people on the ground and say, here's what's needed. Don't send a bunch of water bottles if that isn't the thing that is there kind of idea. But I also hear you saying, and Nathan did also talk about the mental health side, like how can we see these as opportunities to activate the people in our organizations and really also be its own solution outside of loneliness and hybrid workplaces and all of these things that we're hearing about across multiple generations. So thank you for sharing all that. And yeah, and I'd be curious, Nathan, you all probably have a lot of your workforce in many different locations that are responding. When you think about resilience, what does it look like for your workforce, maybe specifically in terms of policy support and the way leaders show up before, during, and after a crisis for you all?
Janelle, you had talked about talking to like working with communities or what's on the ground or not sending something that's unnecessary. Would you sending bottles of water where they're not needed. So one of the things, so in the leadership portion of this is preparedness. So stakeholder engagement, AT&T is huge. Lots of different organizations have lots of different assets. So knowing where these assets sits and knowing who to talk to get what you need where you need it. And then, so Jenny Acosta on our team, external affairs, is constantly working with different localities on, hey, can we fit, for example, the MCC in this parking lot? Can we fit, you need charging trailers here, or where do they need to go? Do you need them? So it's working with the people on the ground, different communities, is very important to do that. So along with preparation is also training. It's investments in assets. That's long term. And I'm going to go back to planning ahead by using this forward-looking climate data. Um, and so that's really it. So preparing, training, investment in assets, and then working with actual communities to make sure we are filling the need when we're community facing relief.
Mm. Yes, that is a very good point of making sure you really understand what's already there, what's needed, and making sure that everybody within the system is well trained and able to respond is huge.
When you have so many assets, one of the biggest roadblocks we hit is who has what, right? And I feel like
Yeah.
I'm constantly discovering different community-based assets within our organization, and I've been here a while. So I think it's just every organization, I'm sure there's some large corporations on this call are shaking their head yes, because it's a regular problem, but it's just one of those roadblocks, and that the leadership and communication helps fix.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm actually remembering that yesterday when you and I were able to catch up, you also just talked about how significant that collaboration is, so that people aren't also tripping over each other to know what assets are where, and then also to work on collaboration, which I think is really true across the spectrum. I heard a story connected to the LA wildfires that there were all these organizations, fantastic organizations, that wanted to feed the first responders after the wildfires. But because the collaboration wasn't necessarily there, it ended up that like some of the firehouses had tons and tons of food that they couldn't even actually all use. So it's really important to know what the assets are, to collaborate with other partners and collaborate with those on the ground to make sure that your response is actually going to build the resilience of the individuals that you're trying to help. So thank you for sharing that story. And I'm curious, David, for what you see, because I know that many employers operate across multiple geographies with very different risk profiles. So how do you think they can build a unified health and resilience strategy that still respects those local realities and needs that Janelle brought up and we just spoke of some?
Yeah, and when I think about this too, one sort of like maybe philosophical framing on this is at any given time, there's about 4 billion people on Earth that have a job or in the workforce, and in the US, it's about 160 million people. And I think it's just important for us to remember how important and how impactful each of those employee-employee relationships can be. I mean, I'll asterisk this to say there are, of course, contractors and gig workers. There's nuance there, as you all know. But the point is that there is such power and impactful potential from employers to really understand these risks as they impact their workforce and really do something in a structured way about it. To your question, Ashley, I think what we have seen is that the organizations that are most effectively understanding the risks to their workforce as it relates to disasters and other risks have sort of a global framework, maybe a before, during, and after framework to say, we expect all managers to be able to understand the kinds of roles that their team has and whether they're going to be subject to flash floods, to extreme heat, whatever the disaster might be. There probably are going to be something in the middle of during a crisis, and I think Nathan's spoken to that about how AT&T approaches that. And then I think sometimes the underrepresented piece is the after, which is to say, how do those financial impacts, how do the mental health impacts impact somebody and affect them, even if they're still showing up to work the next day? Or how does it prevent them from showing up? And so I think there's a global framework there, but then it really will come down to whether it be a office manager, a facilities leader, a country manager, whatever the relationship is, to really have agency and autonomy to understand the specific risks. I know this is a disaster focused webinar. We focus on extreme heat sometimes too, because it's one of the biggest risks out there. And there are places in the world that are simply having people work at night now because they can't during the day. That wouldn't be relevant everywhere right now, but it's relevant to some locations. And so I think that is one example of these changes and tweaks that are being made to protect people, protect a business, but it might be different based on where you are in the world.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I like too that you're saying we have a lot of opportunity to help, but it's really important to have a clear picture of the framework within every company, and
Yeah.
then with if the framework is done and the risks are assessed, that people would really be able to be activated. I think is a big deal too. I know sometimes there's half the issue can actually be the timing and the ability to have people feel empowered to respond as they were set out and as it was intended to do so. Of
If I could I add one more thing, Ashley, on that too.
course.
One of my I shouldn't say favorite stats because it's not a great stat, but from your slide, not great for society, I mean, is only 4% of employers have actually assessed the vulnerability of who's at risk in their workforce. That comes from Mercer, which is one of our very valued partners at Health Action Alliance around this. And I think that shows that as these risks get worse, very few employers are treating it as sort of a core enterprise risk. I'm sure most of you on this call are thinking about finances, probably about AI, like some of these risks and how it affects work. My pitch right now is think about extreme weather and these changing patterns as one of these longer term risks. But I really believe in that when folks know the risks that they or their team are susceptible to, they're going to do something about it. They're paid to be successful. And so I think empowering folks to say, you have staff here, let's look at the historical trends. And then, as Nathan said, what's happening in the future too? What do we guess? That'll empower people to make decisions that keep people safe, as long as they understand sort of those vulnerabilities at home and at work too.
100%. And we talked about from that recent Federal Reserve data too, of like what are those particular populations that we are seeing changes to and that we know are already fragile, and how can we take that knowledge and know that of course disasters exacerbate what's already there very, very often. And so with that knowledge, how can we make sure that they would be set up to be cared for uniquely and quickly during that process? So thank you for adding that in. So Janelle, I would like to hear, of course, I like to keep the optimistic feeling of all of these multi-generations that really want to stay engaged and be a part of the sustaining engagement and community support, even in years when there's not like a single headline event or a major Atlantic hurricane. But there's maybe things that are overlapping crisis around the world, which I think we can relate to right now. What have you learned about keeping people's energy and engagement up during all those overlapping events?
Well, there's a couple of things, Ashley, and David actually touched on something just in terms of employees falling on hardship and from that mental health perspective. So I'm gonna answer that question, and then I'll answer the question that you just asked me. But I do think, to David's point, just around how employees who are in precarious situations, a lot of companies now have taken on mental health as a part of their cause, right? So, whether it is from an inclusion network or any of those groups. But I don't necessarily think that when we think about mental health, we think of the impacts of things like media or social media. So if you're watching and witnessing disasters happen, that can impact individuals who are perhaps on the brink in a very significant way. And so even companies finding the space to provide the space, I think, for employees to react and respond and to actually feel what they feel in the midst of some of these disasters, it can bring up feelings of hopelessness and helplessness and all of those types of things. So I do think it's that sort of part of the general conversation around mental health. I think connecting disaster to that conversation is important. So that's kind of point one. And then the second piece, when we really think about sustaining it overall, I think in large part it comes down to how companies communicate. Because to your point, there are things that happen. There are back-to-back disasters, back-to-back hardship. I think that folks can start to feel a little bit overwhelmed, and there can be a little bit of fatigue. And in some cases, that can even lead to a little bit of apathy. But I think that companies who have a designed framework for how they will engage with disasters, that's a really important starting point. So if you think of as a strategy, are you going to err on the side of preparedness? Are you going to err on the side of response? Are you going to err on the side of recovery? So I think when things are happening all around the world all the time, it gives you a bit of a framework within which you can communicate to your employees what the response is actually going to be, which can help them to feel, okay, you know what, we're not going to do anything right now in the midst of this. Our company and what we do is a little bit longer term. We're going to be part of the longer term recovery of this country, of this town, of this community. So I think continuing to sort of reiterate that and reaffirm the impact that employees can have in each of the phases that you've designed, for your strategy is really important in terms of sustaining engagement. And I also think that bringing together folks and providing the outlet, providing the mechanism for employees to feel like they are empowered to plan, to get ready, to think about all the things that are happening and, how can they be activated? So is it a lunch and learn just to talk about the nature of a disaster? Is it a kit build and bringing something into the office where folks can hands-on, tangibly touch and feel and do something to get ready? Or, is it in terms of the longer term recovery where, your employee champions or your volunteer champions are, working with visit.org or any organization who's on the ground to really understand what's the most pressing need and then finding ways to be able to respond to that. Because I do think that sustaining engagement is really key. And let's be real, let's be all honest on this conversation.
We're
There
worn down.
so much happening in the world right now for everybody. So even coming into disaster season right now, folks are already tired. They're already burnt out. They're already worn out.
Right.
So I think it's to me the communications exercise, having the framework, and then also really just having the space and recognizing employees need the space to even sometimes sort through how they feel about things that are happening in their community, let alone when it's actually happening to them.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing I hear you saying in that is if your organization is clear on where they most want to have impact,
Mhm.
if it is in the relief or the recovery or the mitigation, it, communicate that out and also be free to say this is where we are going to contribute, and you can't be all things to all people. And then you can also, if you are committed in that way, communicate what's been the outcomes, because that in itself can be uplifting. This many people were able to donate, this many people were able to volunteer. You can really give back with that clear commitment for where and how your organization is going to participate. And I think that really helps build the culture when everybody does understand what you're going for and what most aligns with your company. It's able to, join in and want to be part of that, I think, in a different way. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much for your thoughts there.
I
Yeah.
think disengagement sometimes happens, Ashley, when employees don't understand why a company is doing what they're doing, if they feel like their company should be responding. So having that clear decision matrix and enables you to respond to what you will do and then clearly communicate what you won't do and why, so the employees understand
Oh,
how the company strategically is going to show up. And hopefully that can mitigate any feelings of disengagement because there's a level of communication and understanding.
as a communication leader, I love this. This is a great takeaway for all of our clients and partners and friends. Clear communication is awesome, and trusting that you can participate in the ways that most make sense for your organization. That's better for your employees. It leaves less gray space than trying to be all the things. So I'm going to stay with you for a second, Janelle, because if we're thinking about companies that are just beginning on their journey to think about global disaster resilience, I know you guys show up all around the world. What is one simple way to start integrating employee engagement and community stewardship into their plans? Maybe if they're in the early phases and the company might be doing something, but the people aren't quite yet activated, as you spoke of. What could they do?
So I think one of the first ways is to sit down as an organization, as a leadership team, and identify where you want to, I don't want to say play because we're talking about disasters, but where you want to respond.
Yeah.
So to my earlier point, do you want to be on the response, the preparedness? Do you want to be in the response? Do you want to be in the recovery? Because I think that then enables you to very clearly plan and strategically plan across the organization, the communities where your employees might be affected, where your community partners partners might be affected, where your clients might be affected, and what you're going to do and when. It also enables you to then plan strategically for some of the activities that you will do before or during or after for each one of those phases within the sort of the recovery spectrum as well. Because I do think that having a task force, getting individuals together across the organization who everybody is on the same page essentially, and this is where we know we want to start, and mapping what the response plan is actually going to be, and having individuals who actually have ownership for that across the business, I think is a really great place. So if you haven't done anything at all, really just kind of sitting down with some key folks across the organization, likely doing it, cross teams and multiple, individuals, because you want to have multiple folks who are owning this, and then everybody essentially identify where you're going to actually respond, and then building out a strategic plan from there. But I think that that's a good place to start.
Excellent. I mean, adding on to this, Nathan, I know you were talking earlier about preparedness and how your team is able to build that up. Where do you see a gap or vulnerability, and how are you working internally to address that over the next year or two?
First thing I would say, Janelle, you were talking about hygiene kits. And so I think it's really cool from a personal experience engagement is to be able to, as part of volunteer events at AT&T, we build these hygiene kits. And then later you'll see, a news story or something where AT&T is out providing community relief, and you see, and you're like, oh, we put together those hygiene kits. I thought they just put them in a warehouse somewhere, but then you actually see them in the field or see them loaded onto an asset, and it's just cool. I think that's low hanging fruit. I think that's a great volunteer activity. As far as gaps, I spent a long time thinking about this, and there's three of them. One of them is increased assets. And again, I'm talking about our small corporate responsibility footprint. We have 3 charging trailers, very powerful because they move quickly, and then a mobile connectivity center, which moves slow because it's so big. So increasing number of assets so that we can kind of distribute them throughout the United States, so that when a disaster does hit in California, we're not having to move a trailer all the way from Fort Worth to the West Coast. The second one is red tape, decision making. Sometimes it takes longer than you want to admit to decide to deploy an asset. What I would like to see is we work with ITDRC in the field. They're the one who manage all of our community relief assets. Is instead of going from the top down for decision making, deploying assets, ITDRC telling our team, hey, we think this asset needs to go here right now, making that decision, letting us know, and then I can tell that to the leadership. I would love to see that. These are all things we're working on. And then lastly is our AT&T's Employee Relief Fund, since we're talking E4E, is that more people are aware of it. The way it works now is when a disaster tornado hits Missouri, we get an email, our team gets an email with which employees and which counties were affected, and then we blast an email to them and say, hey, just so you guys know, the Employee Relief Fund is here. And it's astonishing to me as someone who's when the Employee Relief Fund work is new to me, is how many people don't know that it exists. And it's a great resource for AT&T employees. So those are 3 gaps. We're working to improve all of them, but those are my thoughts on that.
Fantastic. Yes. I mean, you've set so many of the right pieces in place for success, which I find is always interesting. Even you mentioned the decision making and timing, and sometimes it's still slow, even though you all know where you want to contribute. So it is interesting of how can we increase and empower during crisis? How can we make sure and communicate so that everybody knows what assets are available, or things like programs are available as well, like the relief program. And you guys do a great job. Okay, David, I'm going to switch over to you to get some of your advice. If you had to advise a leadership team on one key metric or signal to watch as they track workforce resilience, how they could be thinking about making progress, what would it be and why?
I don't think there's a simple answer to this, but I'll attempt to do so. And I think it goes back to a theme of this discussion so far, which is that there are so many solutions out there that there really has to be a customized blend based on what we're talking about here. And sometimes it's going to be really providing volunteer opportunities, as Janelle has talked about, and oftentimes with Nathan, there are specific disaster response policies in place with physical and human capital and assets. So what I'm getting to here is, I'll come back to this word vulnerability again, that I think there's understanding the risks that your workers face and I should say at work, but also at home and on their commute is really important, and where they're traveling to. These risks are getting broader, as we've talked about, in all the different places in the US and globally. And there's a good chance that there's some folks who are susceptible to those risks right now that you haven't thought about yet. With that, then this sort of before, during, and after framework, really think about what are you putting in place to actually reduce that vulnerability. And so, for instance, if like just a simple example here, if you're in an area with lots of storms and floods, and I saw the chat earlier, and there are people in those places there. I saw someone say they're from the Pacific Northwest. I'm from Seattle originally. Never had smoke growing up, but now there's smoke all the time because of wildfires. That's just one example, right? Those are risks. Thinking about how do you reduce that vulnerability? How do you get someone an air filter at home? How do you think about make sure everyone has a go bag and evacuation plan at their home? Think about what those metrics are for you, and then once or twice a year, measure them. Put it into an HR pulse check, put it into an employee survey, and you'll really start seeing how does the education and the preparation component really reduce vulnerability. We're not going to stop these risks, but this is the whole definition of resilience, Ashley, that you talked about right before. What do you put in
Mhm.
place before so the recovery is easier and shorter?
Yeah, excellent advice. Okay, I am looking here. I have one question that I see from the Q&A, but I am sorry I haven't clicked over to there before. This is a great time for everybody. If you do have any questions for any of the panelists, feel free to drop them in because we do want to hear from you. The one I see right now is, and any of you answer that want to, but it's how do you think about success and global disaster resilience? Like, of course, everybody is, for all the programs or funding or whatever they're putting in, there's always the metrics that they need to be giving back out. So, what does good look like 1 year after a major event for your company? What would you all say?
Time in here. So, something that sticks out to me about the question is a year from the disaster, and then so we're talking connectivity. Something that was said to me a long time ago that I always think about is when a disaster hits, what's the first thing you do? Is you pick up the phone, you call your mom or dad, make sure everyone's okay. And
Yes.
so connectivity, you don't have a long time. You don't have so we're counting downtime in minutes, hours, and days. So in the resiliency work that we do in preparation, if you're doing your job properly, and this is not always the case, sometimes you just can't get around these unexpected disasters, but the communities in which you operate, there's a disaster and that connectivity doesn't drop, and you've been successful. But it's hard to count an ROI on that. So we do a lot of working groups with different companies who have resiliency arms, and it's trying to find a return on investment in work that you're doing that's going to affect your infrastructure, your connectivity 5 or 10 years down the line, or may actually never come to fruition. So success is little to no downtime just for a large telecommunications company.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. Any thoughts, Janelle or David, on that one?
I would, in addition to sort of the, make sure folks are back, and you have the long tail that you talked about, Ashley. We've reduced those mental health risks and the financial risks,
Mhm.
which are key. I would say, what are you doing different next time is sort of a metric. Like I think there's a continuous improvement thing here, and there are more and more technologies and platforms and policy innovation happening about how do you actually keep people safe from these disasters. We talk about that a little bit on our website and as part of extreme weather and work. But ultimately, we have to innovate and adapt just as fast as some of these disasters are. And so I would say a year ago this happened to us. What would we do different right now if it happened? And I think that's a good metric for improvement.
Constant improvement. I love it. We're all about that too, because really every disaster is an opportunity to learn truly and make the next improvement, even though it's not predictable what's coming. I'm going to have one last question here that I see, and then we'll wrap up. Janelle, this looks like it is related to employee engagement. I think there is a narrative, and this has come out in media as well, of making sure that the volunteering is actually benefiting the intended folks. And the flip side of this is the individual talking about that volunteering is having a moment. So it's like both a positive and a negative, that volunteering is a really strong asset for many companies right now and a great response. But how do you make sure that it also actually benefits the intended recipients?
100% to whoever said volunteering is having a moment, because I mean, there's so many research and data pieces right now talking about the fact that participation is up for volunteerism overall, but the actual hours per volunteer is down. I think the average they're saying is about 5 hours now that volunteers are actually spending on an annual basis. And I believe that's down 23%. Don't quote me on the actual stat. So 100% volunteering is having a moment right now. And I do think a big part of how we work at visit.org and I would say why we're different, being a certified B Corp, having impact really built right into how we operate as an organization, having a beneficiary network that has been designed with over 4,000 organizations, that has been something that we've done thoughtfully and intentionally to ensure that any experience that happens through our organization in partnership with our corporate partners like AT&T and others that we work with is to ensure that the need that the project that any employee is working on is because of a need the charity actually has. We operate on a first do no harm principle. We want to ensure that any volunteering is actually going to benefit community. It's actually going to benefit an organization. We take the time on our nonprofit side to work in collaboration with nonprofits to really design the experiences that we have and that we offer to corporate partners. So, the corporate partners that we work with can rest assured that they are going to make a difference. Nathan, to your point, it's not going to end up in a warehouse somewhere just sitting there. Not only are we ensuring that the need is immediate, but then we actually go out to our beneficiary network before we're dispersing, any of the items, or any of the outputs from any of the kit builds and stuff like that to reconfirm that they still actually need it. So if we have one of the nonprofits in our network to say, hey, AT&T just did a kit build and we're actually good, we're fine, then we go out to the next organization who said that they would have had a need for a comfort kit as an example, and we're then confirming with them that they actually need it. And I think how this really ties into the whole conversation around disaster, I do think that this is a way that companies can get employees engaged on a regular cadence. So, just to say that you're a part of your strategy is we are going to be in the preparedness bucket. Then maybe what you do is you build a monthly on-site volunteer opportunity where
Cool.
employees can come together, to do some of these hygiene kits, to do some of these comfort kits, or any of the other experiences that might benefit disaster. And then to Nathan's point, when something does strike, all of a sudden you're actually seeing the kits that you would have created, in action because they're being deployed in the most timely fashion to the area of greatest need. So 100%, I think that the level of intentionality that it takes to ensure that volunteering is done right is not something easy by any stretch of the imagination. But that is where, I think having partners like us, or even, within your own respective teams, just thinking about how you actually go out to nonprofits and try to partner. I think in many cases, there's inequity that exists between funder-fundee relationships and stuff like that too. So really going out to really and truly, before you do anything, understand what community actually needs and then how you as companies will actually show up to respond to that in times of disaster or otherwise.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nathan, David, and Janelle. It has been such a good conversation. You all have so much rich experience and really practical takeaways. So thank you for the conversation today. As we wrap, I just encourage anyone, feel free to reach out to them on next steps, how to have that risk assessment, how to think about employee engagement, and how to hear like how you care for customers and your people at the same time and assess risk. They're all experts in this. So I want to leave everyone with just quick three things that you can take away as you think about global resilience. The first is to audit what you already have. And we've talked about that. Most organizations have benefits, policies, and resources that apply in disaster scenarios. And the gap is usually in awareness. And I think Nathan mentioned that today. Or most of our folks don't even know that they have the program that they have. So make sure that everybody knows about the programs that you have, and that what is available to them before the crisis, not necessarily after the crisis. It's much easier where they know how to access. Second, identify your top exposures. We all saw the stat at the beginning, whether it's geography, role type, or financial vulnerability of the workplace. start mapping where your people are most at risk. The tools exist, and the cost of not knowing is definitely becoming more expensive year over year. And third is to build the muscle now. Don't wait until this is an event that happens to your people. Integrate disaster resilience into your engagement calendar, your benefits review. And like Janelle just said, whatever area you're involved in, maybe go ahead and line up what that means to participate in advance and know what you're going to do and the partners that you're going to do it with. So thank you for joining us today. A recording and follow-up with the resources will be shared, and we appreciate your time and commitment and role in global resilience around the world. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.